The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Health for a Lifetime. We're glad that you've joined us today, and we hope that as a result of today's program, you will have health that lasts for a lifetime. Today we're going to be talking about healthy eating. The Bible, that ancient book that now many are seeing as a book of health, is something you might want to go and get right now. Do you have a Bible at home? If you do, keep listening, but go and get your Bible. We're going to be looking at some text today from the Bible. We're joined today with Dr. Glen Wiltse. He is from South Dakota, actually North Dakota, but you work in South Dakota. You consult for the Black Hills Health and Education Center.
Right.
And so you've been teaching people about healthy eating for many years. The Bible says, why do you spend money for that which is not food? And he asked the question, why do you spend money for things that really are not bread? Those types of things. The prophet Isaiah tells us. Well, what should we be eating? What is a healthy diet?
Well, eating, of course, is one of the most fundamental actions of our entire lives. We need to have it to keep us going. And we need to eat the right things, prepared in the right way. And there actually are two basic problems with the foods that we eat. Number one is that we eat too much, and number two is that we eat the wrong kind. And if we could just straighten out those two things, we'd be okay.
Someone said once that the average American eats 7 to 10 of the same things day in, day out, and the problem is that they're the wrong things. Would that be a good way to put it?
That is a good way to put it. That's exactly right, yes.
Well, why is it that we have this problem?
We have deviated from the original instruction. I think we need to go to the manual, go to the operator's manual. You buy a new vehicle, you buy a new car, you buy a new lawnmower, an instruction book comes along, tells you how to take care of it.
Well, can't we just watch maybe programs like this or others and watch the commercials and live by those?
We could if we're looking at the right commercials, but these programs are okay, but there are some commercials out there in the world that aren't the best. They promote things that aren't the best for us.
We hope that you've gotten your Bible or you've found a Bible at home and you can follow along. We're going to be looking at the original book on health, the Bible. And Dr. Wiltse, where should we go first?
Let's go to the beginning. Let's go to the book of the beginnings, Genesis. And if we look there, we're going to look at some facts, some verses, some information that a lot of our viewers are probably pretty familiar with already. But sometimes we need to have a little reminder. It's easy to backtrack. It's easy to backslide. And so I think a reminder once in a while is okay. Let's look at Genesis 1:28 and see, what did God say? He planted man in the Garden of Eden. He gave him the beautiful surroundings, the animals to look at, and a beautiful climate. And then he says, I've given you food to eat. I've given you, verse 28, he says, I've given you the seeds, the trees bearing fruit, the grains, everything that grows from the ground, that comes from the flower.
So he didn't pass out T-bone steaks that day. He didn't put the gravy on the table. It was fruits, nuts, and grains.
That's right.
Okay.
And they stayed on this until after the fall. And if we go to Genesis 3, we find that after the fall...
A couple chapters over, Genesis 3, after the fall of men, you meaning the falling into sin, they fell away from God. Okay.
Right. And so God changed their diet. Now, I'm not sure exactly why that was. We could do some study and try to figure out physiologically why they had to add vegetables, the plants, the stems, the leaves, the tubers. Before that, they were just eating the seeds, the grains, the legumes, the nuts, the fruits, and so forth. But then the rutabagas and potatoes and carrots, and then the plants, the celery and the Swiss chard and so forth. All of these things were added to man's diet at that time. And they stayed on this diet, were supposed to at least, until after the time of the flood.
Okay.
And following that, if we go on a little further over into Genesis 9,
Okay.
we find there that God gave permission on an emergency situation to use a flesh diet. But there were some restrictions.
So in Genesis 9, he said you can use a flesh diet. This was after the flood, assuming that maybe there wasn't as much vegetation, there wasn't this or that after they got out of the big boat.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were not to eat the blood.
Okay.
They were restricted to not eat the fat. And they were not to eat unclean animals.
What would meat like that taste if they had no fat or no blood?
It would be pretty bland.
Okay.
I don't know whether any of our viewers have ever tried eating it or not, but if you eat an animal in which the blood has all been drained, it's a pretty flat taste.
So you couldn't get a, like say, a hamburger from a hamburger stand with no blood in it?
It would be impossible.
Okay.
They're just not slaughtered that way.
So even people that are eating meat and they think that's okay because maybe the Bible says to do that, if it has taste, a lot of taste in it, it probably doesn't have all the blood taken.
Yeah, that's probably true. So, but the best thing is to, even today, especially with the disease that's coming into the animal kingdom now, even the permission that man was given at that time, I think that God is revoking. Mm-hmm. Now, each person has to make his own decision on this. We all know that a vegetarian diet has been proven scientifically to be the more healthy. Mm-hmm. But it's not a prerogative for church membership or for anything you do. But I think each person needs to make up his own mind whether he's going to follow a vegetarian diet or continue to eat some animal products.
You're talking. You're a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and you're talking in your church, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They don't make that a test of being a member,
no.
but it's looking more and more like really the original diet's the best. You had mentioned clean and unclean foods. So tell us about that.
The first intimation that we have that there was a distinction between clean and unclean is at the time Noah was admitting the animals into the ark. And at that time, the record says that he put 7 clean and 1 pair of unclean animals into the ark. So there was a distinction there. This was
even before the flood?
Even before the flood.
Okay.
This was enlarged upon when Moses was bringing the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, and these ceremonial laws were given. But if we analyze the habits, the eating habits of these animals, we find that in general the unclean animals are the scavengers.
Clean up all the trash.
The pig,
okay.
The hawk, the vulture,
all right.
The fish that eat off in the bottom, scavenge what's on the ocean floor, the lake floor.
You know, recently a lot of people have talked about what we eat and why. I mean, there's things like mad cow disease. There's all these other different things that are coming up. Really has focused the scientific community on this. What do you think of the food pyramid?
Well, I think that it's something that serves as a fairly good guide, but it does need to have a little bit of modification if a person is going to really follow the very best lifestyle.
Okay.
We'll notice that, and this is a new food guideline that was introduced just a few years ago, and it is considerably better than what it used to be. The foundation, of course, is complex carbohydrate, you know, the fruits and vegetables and so on. And then higher up we have on one side they do allow some milk and some eggs and so forth, but as vegetarians we feel that this should be a total vegetarian pyramid. And then, of course, at the very top is the fats, or refined products, the fats and sugars, which should be eaten in extremely small quantities. So this pyramid can be used by a vegetarian with only a little bit of modification.
Do you think I know the 4 food groups, there's been shown now that there were some special interest groups that monkeyed around with that a bit. Do you think there's been any monkeying around with this pyramid?
At the time this pyramid was recommended by a select group that was appointed to do this work and to analyze whether there was a need for improvement, there was a lot of change between what they recommended and what the Department of Agriculture finally came up with as the food pyramid there. It's pretty good as it is, but it could be better. Should be total vegetarian to be real good. There should be less fat, less animal products in it.
You know, I have a lot of friends that talk to me, and they know that I'm a vegetarian, but they say, so am I. And then they say, and you know, I eat fish, I eat chicken, I eat this, and then they say, but I'm a vegetarian. Are there different types of vegetarians?
I've found this through the years that many times my patients will say, well, I'm a vegetarian, but I eat some fish, or I come up to eat a meal at a banquet or something, and they say, well, can we bring you some chicken when I tell them I'm a vegetarian? As though that chicken didn't eat or didn't breathe. So there are different types of vegetarians. Of course, the omnivorous diet's the typical American diet that most people eat. And then there's those that use
omnivorous means they eat anything.
They eat anything. Then there's the lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet. They eat vegetables plus eggs and milk and dairy products.
Okay.
And then some people even break that down to the ovo-vegetarian. They eat just vegetables and eggs. And then there's those that are the pure vegetarian. They don't eat any animal products. And then this is something that a lot of people don't understand well, is who is a vegan? A lot of people think a vegan or vegan. The people who are classified themselves in this category used to consider that if they just ate vegetables and nothing else, they were a vegan. But actually, a true vegan not only doesn't eat doesn't eat animal products, but he also doesn't use any animal product. No leather shoes, nothing that comes from the animal kingdom at all.
All right, so there's probably
it's more than just a diet.
There's probably less vegans watching right after that comment than before.
Probably so. Probably more pure vegetarians than fewer vegans.
Well, what is so great about a vegetarian diet? What are the advantages of it?
Well, what I like about it is that it makes it so that we follow the Bible dictum of preserving the body temple.
Okay.
We have learned that the standard American diet, which is SAD.
SAD, huh?
SAD. People who follow that have a shorter lifespan. And they found that total vegetarians, their lifespan is on the average 12 years longer than that of the average population.
Is that right?
So if we are trying to preserve that body temple, to preserve it in just the way that God would have it to be, if we're going to avoid breaking the commandment that says thou shalt not kill, actually we're killing ourselves. If we allow ourselves to eat a diet that causes us to die sooner than we would otherwise.
Is it cheaper?
Actually, it is. And a lot of people don't believe that. They think that, no, it costs more to eat a vegetarian diet. But it really doesn't. There have been a lot of financial consultants and statisticians who've studied this out. And it's cheaper. A lot of other advantages, too, you know.
Like?
Cleaner kitchen.
All right,
less
because you don't have
grease in the air.
All right.
All right. Another thing, there's less protein in it. And so we'll be discussing this in another program, but the relationship between protein and osteoporosis and loss of calcium from our body is very marked.
Are you able to have as much endurance, or do you need that meat to be able to run those 15 miles you run every morning?
We don't have time to go into all of these tests that were done on them, but there have been a number of studies that have definitely proven that an athlete's endurance is increased by using a total vegetarian, pure vegetarian diet. Lots of carbohydrates. And not only are they able to endure longer, but they feel better during the time that they're doing it.
Less cancer, less heart disease, less diabetes, less all those different things?
Less obesity, more longevity. They're just healthier all the way around. Even arthritis is less common among people who are following a total vegetarian diet than those who don't.
Well, you even mentioned to me kidney stones.
That's right. Kidney stones are less common as well, primarily because of the lower amount of protein. You know, the average American eats about 95 grams of protein a day, whereas the authorities determine that about 45 to 55 grams is enough. And the extra load on the kidney to get rid of that extra protein causes problems with the kidneys and produces kidney stones.
We've been talking with Dr. Glen Wiltse. He's a health educator. He's a physician. He's suggesting to us that the vegetarian diet is the best diet. And when we come back, we're going to learn more about why that is. If you have your Bible, go and get it during the break. We've been looking at some text. And when we come back, we hope you'll join us.
Have you found yourself wishing that you could shed a few pounds? Have you been on a diet for most of your life, but not found anything that will really keep the weight off? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then we have a solution for you that works. Dr. Hans Deal and Dr. Eileen Luddington have written a marvelous booklet called Reversing Obesity Naturally, and we'd like to send it to you free of charge. Here's a medically sound approach successfully used by thousands who were able to eat more and lose weight permanently without feeling guilty or hungry through lifestyle medicine. Dr. Deal and Dr. Luddington have been featured on 3ABN, and in this booklet, They present a sensible approach to eating, nutrition, and lifestyle changes that can help you prevent heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. Call or write today for your free copy of Reversing Obesity Naturally, and you could be on your way to a healthier, happier you. It's absolutely free of charge, so call or write today.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Dr. Glen Wiltse. He's a physician, and he's been a health educator for many years. We're talking about healthy eating. We've talked about the validity of the vegetarian diet. Why is it so much better?
It has a lot of chemicals that are favorable to the metabolic processes in our body.
So vegetables, the things, plants, they have chemicals that help us.
That's right. They're there naturally. The Lord outlined this diet for us, and He put in it the things that we need. And the chemists have been analyzing the content of these foods, and they found out there are a lot of different things. There are things that are called phytochemicals. Okay. Phyto is a Latin word which refers to plants. So these are really just plant chemicals. Things like antioxidants, vitamins A and vitamin E, and vitamin C.
And what do antioxidants do briefly?
Okay, they remove the byproducts of tissue metabolism. Our cells burn up the food that we supply it, and as a waste product, just like the exhaust from your automobile, that needs to be gotten rid of. If it stays in the cell, it can be damaging to it. So these antioxidants are things that are present in the foods that we eat that help to remove these harmful agents called free radicals from the cells so that they don't do the damage to our cells.
Okay, what else?
And also there are others that are called flavonoids. They have other functions in helping our cells to function better. And then, of course, there are the phytoestrogens. You know, women need estrogen. It's a normal part of their metabolic processes. Their hormone level of estrogen is necessary for the preservation of good health. And the estrogens that are supplied in plants are more healthful for them than the artificial elements that may be taken in a pill form. And so the plants provide these estrogens for women. Now, there may be some times that they'll need to take some extra, but generally speaking, they get along very well just with the estrogens that are present in the plants.
So all this is in the plants.
Helpful effects without the harmful effects.
Okay, so we have our pharmacy right there in what we eat if we eat the right things.
Right.
Okay.
There's less fat, there's no cholesterol, there's the right amount of protein, there's more fiber, they're less calorie dense, so it's really the best thing for us.
You know, I've worked with many physicians over the years, and most of them, as I worked in the hospital setting, haven't done what you've done today. You've pointed to the Bible and said, hey, look at these texts and look at this, and now you're beginning to give some scientific evidence. Is the Bible a scientific book?
Well, I guess there was a master scientist who was behind the writing of it. The men who penned the words probably were not scientists, but they were given information, which is very valuable for us today. But interestingly enough, we find that the scientists today who are going through the foods and through the lifestyle that we follow come forth with some very interesting conclusions. And here's a quotation from a medical magazine called Patient Care back in 1990. So it's fairly recent. And you can read it here on the screen. The epidemiologic evidence clearly shows that the consumption of whole plant foods seems to be associated with a lower risk of several types of cancer and other diseases. So here's a conclusion from a medical writer, and this is corroborated by other medical researchers too. This is not just
an example of many.
Right, exactly.
What kind of advantages are diseases? You know, it mentioned some diseases. Probably one of the biggest ones that people think about as a disease they don't want to get is cancer. Does the vegetarian diet help protect against cancer?
The epidemiologic studies, the research definitely show that various cancers are much less common among people who follow a vegetarian diet. Cancer of the breast, cancer of the prostate, cancer of the uterus, cancer of the colon, the pancreas. All of these are much less frequent among people who follow a vegetarian diet. And they've been found that actually just one specific food can even make a difference. They discovered that in a large survey, the people who ate beans 3 or more times a week had a 30% reduction in the incidence of colon cancer.
Wow. So beans instead of red meat. Go get those red beans if you want something red, not red meat. Okay.
Exactly. And they found out that people who ate meat regularly 2 to 4 times a week actually had twice as much cancer of the bladder than people who didn't eat meat at all. So there's a lot of evidence from the researchers to demonstrate that we really are better off. And then, of course, mad cow disease. We've all heard about this, and we know how that's
Lots
spread.
of people are becoming vegetarians in England, I understand.
That's what I've heard, yes, and understandably so.
And heart disease?
Heart disease. Well, we've discussed heart disease on a previous program, and actually, pure vegetarians, compared with the average population, had only 12% of the heart attacks that the average population had. I mean, that's significant, and that's enough to make a person want to make a change.
But don't we need milk?
Milk is something that we absolutely do not need. In fact, humans are the only species who continue to eat milk after the age of weaning. There must be a reason for that. Another problem with milk, too, is that a lot of people are allergic to it. A lot of people don't have the enzyme in the stomach that digests milk sugar, so they have reactions from it. So there are a lot of good reasons why a person should leave milk.
So the milk mustache isn't everything that it's cracked up to be?
That's exactly right.
What about fish?
Okay.
Pesco, I guess they call them vegetarians.
Yes, the pesco vegetarians. We have some information on that we'd like to show our viewers here.
Okay.
Actually, 38 to 95% of all fish that have been analyzed have been found to contain cancer, depending on the source from which it was taken, whether it was from the lake. 1 in 10 hogs have trichinosis in them, even in spite of the care that the farmers give them.
Trichinosis is what?
That's that little worm that burrows into the muscles of the body and stays there for the rest of your life.
That doesn't sound too appetizing to me.
It isn't. It isn't good at all. It's a microscopic-sized worm. And then, of course, chickens. Kentucky Fried Chicken is a great stuff. But actually, those chickens, as they go through the packing plant, are inspected. One chicken is inspected every 2 seconds. So you know they don't get a very careful inspection. So a lot of diseases come through from them. In fact, 81 out of 84 meat inspectors who were interviewed said that birds that were formerly taken off the production line because of disease pass at the present time.
Is that right? So they're not really watching out for you. Just because it's on the shelf doesn't mean that it's going to be the best for you.
That's right. In fact, there was just a recent report about the number of salmonella infections that were directly related to chickens. And there was over 300,000 cases of salmonella last year and 20 cases of death.
So fish is not what it's cracked up to be. Chicken's not what it's cracked up to be. The other white meat is the other white meat that can cause problems, and we've got to be careful with the chickens and the inspectors as well. Anything else?
Well, even when they find a cancer on a beef or a chicken that's going through the production line, they'll just cut out the cancer, sell the rest of it off at the meat market, so you can take your chances there. If there was cancer in that animal, there probably was metastases, and so there could be cancer cells in the part of it that you're getting, actually. And sometimes also, spoiled meat that's gotten off color, will be sent back to the processors. They recolor it and send it back for resale again. So there are a lot of bad things about the animal industry.
Most of the world doesn't eat meat. It's only the affluent places, right? So
that's right.
Are there environmental issues? What if everybody started to eat meat?
We would really be unable to supply the whole world with meat if we were to try to do such. In addition to that, there's much more water is used to produce a pound of meat than a pound of vegetable foods. In fact, if we can get the next slide on here, environmental, it shows that 16 pounds of grain or soybeans to produce only 1 pound of beef. So see what a waste. What a waste. A person could eat the 16 pounds of grain or soybeans, but if he eats it in the form of meat, he just gets 1 pound of it.
Wow, 5,000 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef.
That's right.
That must be for the feed, for what the cow eats, and then I don't know where the other water.
Exactly. There was a researcher several years ago who analyzed the amount, and they said that the amount of meat that's eaten by one family, the amount of water to make this amount of meat would be enough to float the Queen Elizabeth.
Wow.
So that's a lot of wasted water there. In addition to that, it takes 25 gallons of water to produce a pound of wheat.
You mentioned earlier something I think that I really want you to share. It's cheaper to be a vegetarian.
That's right. It really is.
Tell us why.
Okay. This is part of it right here. It takes so much raw produce to develop that pound of meat. If we're putting 16 pounds of grain or soybeans to produce 1 pound of beef, that's a lot of waste. A lot of it's going to waste. In addition to that, there's the conversion of protein by the animal, the plant protein, to the animal protein is so inefficient that the man could just as well eat the protein as it grows from the soil rather than taking it secondhand. Plus the fact that the secondhand is not as healthy for him anyway.
Do you go to the doctor less? Do you have to go to the hospital less if you eat?
Exactly right. It's been well proven that vegetarians have less incidence of doctor visits. They'd have to go to the hospital less frequently, less medical expenses as well.
We've got about 2 minutes left. I want you to share something. You know, some people always have concerns about a vegetarian diet. What are some common concerns, and why should or shouldn't they be concerns?
You know, you may be eating a vegetarian diet, but somebody may have been messing around with those vegetables.
Okay.
They may have been highly processed. They may have a lot of fat added to them. They may have sugar added to them. So our motto should be to eat the foods in as nearly the way that they grew as we possibly can.
Okay.
We need to be concerned about proteins. That's one of the concerns that a lot of people have when they go on a vegetable diet. Are they getting enough protein? We don't need to worry about that. If you eat enough calories, you're automatically going to get enough protein. A lot of people worry about iron. Is a vegetarian going to get enough iron? Iron is present in dried beans and greens and beets and prunes, dried fruits. You don't need to worry about that. Calcium is present in our greens, our broccoli.
Don't need
the
milk.
Fruits from the garden. Don't need to worry about the milk. Vitamin B12. There's been a lot of research on that, and probably the vegetarian doesn't need to supplement with vitamin B12. But I always tell my patients, if they're going on a total vegetarian diet, just to play safe, take a vitamin B12 tablet once a week.
A yes or no question for you. Is it safe for children?
It's interesting that Dr. Benjamin Spock, who wrote the Children's Bible, bestseller next to the Bible for many years, made the statement, and I'll read what he said. We should rear children on a plant-based diet devoid of dairy products after the age of 2. So his reasons were better weight control, less heart disease, less diabetes, less hypertension, less cancer. It's just better, even by the baby specialist, American's baby doctor.
In the last 30 seconds, let's put up that graphic that you showed me earlier about implementing the change. How can we make this change?
Okay, I think that's important. Number one, we need to make a decision. We need to make a commitment that we're going to make a change and stay with it. We need to start with the plant foods that you like. We need to
do it rapidly.
Gradually add new ones. But don't taper off.
Okay.
Just make a change right away. It may seem difficult at first. Think of the rewards, think of the dividends, and make the change.
Doctor, thanks so much for sharing with us. I know that at the end here we could talk a lot more about this very important subject. We hope that as you've been watching, you've heard some things that make you think seriously about what you're eating, about what you shouldn't eat, about what you should eat, about how to do it. If you have questions, call us. We hope that you have health that lasts for a lifetime.